Hello, everyone, wherever you are. We know so many of you are connecting from different parts of the world. Thank you, Adrian, Caro, Heidi, and Catherine. Thank you for joining us for another climate talk by Porto Protocol, this particular one in partnership with Great Wine Capitals Global Network. As usual, let us introduce Porto Protocol before we dig into our talk. We are an international foundation building an open platform of climate solutions spread across the wine value chain. You see, we have this enormous ambition of acting as a catalyst for climate action within the wine world. How do we plan to do this? The shortest answer is together, through collaborative sharing. Every day we are learning how to make this happen. To achieve it, to make it meaningful, we need our members spread across the wine value chain from different wine regions, different sizes, and different stages of climate action to share with this growing community what they are doing to address climate crisis. We are not looking for perfection, we are looking for action. So consider this as an invitation to act and to join us. We would love to meet you, and we are a click away. Now, these climate talks are one of the tools we have of achieving this mission of ours, having people from different regions, profiles, companies share with our community their experiences, the best they have done, and that they know how. Today's topic is transforming wine tourism into climate action, looking into best practice to make this happen, and how companies can and should align their values with their wine tourism operation. And so to build on this subject, we have invited to our digital table various speakers. From Portugal, we have Adrian Bridge, CEO of the Floodgate Partnership, a group with various port wine brands, namely Taylor's Port, various hotels such as the Yateman, and a more recent project, the World of Wine Cultural Center, all in the Porto region. Furthermore, Adrian is a member of the Strategic Tourism Council for Porto and north of Portugal. And last but not least, he's also the leader and mentor of this institution, Porto Protocol. So thank you, Adrian, for being here. Next, we have Caro. Caro and her husband have been running and owning Chateau Philly in Sausignac, where she has been walking her talk as a passionate advocate for eco-friendly living, organic and biodynamic agriculture, as well as sustainable practices. And far away from South Africa, we have Heidi Newton-King. She's a Sustainability and Human Resources Director at Spear, one of the oldest wine farms in South Africa. Heidi has an extensive experience in tourism sector, and we may call her a guardian of the values, so to speak, of the way Spears make sure that their values as an organization are present in their operation as a wine farm. And as a host for this debate, we have Catherine Leparmentier. Catherine is the managing director of our partner at this talk, Great Wine Capitals. And Catherine oversaw the launch of this network more than 20 years ago and has been developing it ever since, giving her a thorough knowledge of global wine tourism. So without further ado, I wish you all the luck. Thank you so much for being here. These guests of ours, as well as you on the other side of the screen. Catherine, the stage is yours, and I'll see you later.
Thank you so much, Marta, for the introduction. So happy to be here and sharing our expertise about wine tourism with you. And the Great Wine Capitals Global Network was launched in 1999 on a Bordeaux Chamber of Commerce initiative. It represents a great community of partners and representatives from 11 among the world's greatest cities and their associated wine regions, with the objective of sustaining the health and prosperity of wine-related industries, communities, and tourism in our regions. Our focus is definitely wine tourism, but we are also very aware of all the challenges the wine and tourism industries are facing, such as global warming. Almost 20 years ago, we launched an international contest, the Best of Wine Tourism Awards program, available in 7 categories, one of them being sustainable wine tourism practices. So you see, for the last 20 years or so, we've been awarding wineries for their efforts in that field. So sustainability concern is nothing new for our organization, nor for our local wine businesses. And this is why we are so happy and proud to be partners of the Porto Protocol Foundation. The wine industry went through many upheavals since the 1980s. Today, one of its main challenges is to respond to the environmental emergency while still preserving its economic viability and the quality of its production within strongly disrupted climate conditions. The wine industry has been working hard to mitigate its effect on climate change from viticulture all the way through packaging and business practices. Wine tourism being an extension of wineries' activities, leading to an additional source of income, it needs to be aligned with the company's values and strategic objectives. Moreover, it's through wine tourism that winemaking territories will be able to communicate, create awareness, and promote how they give priority to the principles of sustainable development. So how can wine tourism promote the actions put in place by the wineries in favor of sustainable development and agroecological transition? And how can it even stimulate those practices? We will start this conversation by asking our experienced and knowledgeable guests to present us their most remarkable initiatives, measures, and mitigation actions they implemented to turn their wine tourism in operation into a more efficient and environmentally friendly activity. So let's start by you, Adrian. As the CEO of the Flatgate Partnership, you've been a pioneer in wine tourism. Which adaptations has your organization enacted to address climate change?
Well, Catherine, thank you very much. Thank you, everybody, for joining on this call. Now, I think that the key issue for us in terms of climate change is we place it in the heart of what we do in our business. And you know, on the one hand, we started as a wine company 300 years ago and clearly understand the importance of our vineyards and sustainability in everything that we're doing there. But you know, in the last 20, 30 years, as tourism has grown, we've been able to move into that area of business. I think it's very positive for the wine industry to have a tourism arm. It gets us closer to our consumers. It allows us to convey an authentic and consistent message. And I think that's a very key point when we look at tourism and branding. You know, when people come to your winery, they need to see that what you talk about is what you actually do. So consistency is a critical issue. I think for our approach to this with major activities, I think, for example, our hotel, the Yeatman, which was a totally new construction, about 10% of the costs of building that was in environmentally friendly activities. Now, the reason we did it is because when you're building, it's probably the easiest moment to implement some of the changes or adaptations you can. For example, we recover all of the water from baths, reprocess it and use that water for irrigation of the gardens, as well as for grey water for the flushing of the toilets. I mean, a simple system. You can't retrofit that into a building, but you can put it in the start. It pushes up the initial cost, but in the longer term, the payback is there. For example, in that hotel, all of the hot water is heated off solar panels on the roof. So it's these sorts of initiatives which we were able to do, because when we look at wine tourism, we look at it the same way as we do our wine business. It is a long-term intergenerational business, and therefore justifies the initial capital expenditure.
Thank you very much. Yes, indeed, consistency, the key, right? Caro, we know that at Chateau Philly, you've been organic and eco-sensitive from the start. What are your most innovative wine tourism practices, and how is climate change affecting your operations?
Thanks, Catherine, and thank you to everybody for being on the call. It's a real pleasure to be here tonight for this discussion. I think this is so important to all of us. Absolutely, we all realize we're in an existential situation and we need to act, and that means, as Adrian said, kind of building this into everything we do, from like every decision we make, every new product idea we have, packaging, you know, in terms of our wine business, but in wine tourism as well, from the construction buildings, as Adrian was talking about, and absolutely that in our construction of the wine lodge and the new tasting room wine school, we took into account ecological building practices. We also built in capturing the water that comes off all the roofs so we can reuse that. And used, I guess, the idea of climate change to drive so many of the decisions that we made. And then in terms of the actual tourism that we do, we really aim to educate and share with people from the very moment that they kind of arrive. If they're staying with us, in the introduction, we'll tell them a little bit about things like how recycling works, that we're on a green energy supply, so we appreciate them kind of participating in doing as much as they can to help us keep our energy consumption low. We share this information in a nice way, in an educative way. I think it's so important that, yes, this is built into everything we do, that it's like a sharing exchange, that we ask people for ideas as well, that we don't kind of come out prescriptive, oh, you know, this is what we must do, that it's a really a sharing, participative way of this, sharing this information, because we're all learning. Let's face it, we're all learning and reading and knowing more about climate change. I've done a course with the University of Michigan to kind of understand this in terms of a wider perspective as well for our business, and for sharing this information, like with people when we do workshops and so on. And we did an organic and biodynamic trail that takes people around the vineyard, and they can visit like different points where we tell them about the environmental aspects of what we do. Of course, the organic, biodynamic, what that means for the farming, for the winemaking. And we end off with a panel that's about what we can do for climate change and what we've done as a business for to address climate change, to help to mitigate it. And we ask people for their suggestions of what else we could do. And I think this goes so wide, you know, it goes to even asking our suppliers, thinking each time you're asking for something or you're buying, and obviously we've all looked at our bottles and, you know, gone as deep as we can on lightening our bottles and, you know, recycled paper for our labels and all of that. But it's not enough. We have to keep looking for more. So yeah, I think that it is definitely in everything we do, we've got, and I heard someone speaking the other day actually about this, and he was like, no matter what your career is, no matter what your industry is, this has to be a focus for all of us. And definitely in wine tourism, we've got a unique place because we have an opportunity to educate as well, to share experience and our passion for the planet and for nature, because as wine growers, we're very connected to nature. And I think this is another important aspect that we can bring. People are hungry for that, and we can share it.
Yeah, thank you. Excellent. Yeah, passion for nature. I think the youngsters in particular are quite aware about this. And we see sometimes the youngsters more interested than others into all these practices. Very, very, very nice. Heidi, how do peers initiatives empower local communities to make positive social and environmental changes? What would you say the role of wine tourism is in these practices?
In this space? Well, I think, firstly, hello to everybody. Caro, you gave me such a lovely intro actually into what I wanted to say around this, because you focused around this is about all of us, and it can't be a top-down approach, you know, that there needs to be an understanding by everyone, which is everyone who works for us in our businesses and our communities that surround us and our suppliers. And at the same time, I do think context is so important. So maybe I bring a different context from a South African perspective. One of the key things we learned very early on, this has also been a long journey for us as well, more than 20 years. And one of the things that we learned very early on was You know, you can make all of these technological changes to an environment, but there's a huge amount of behavioral change that needs to go with it. It can't be implemented on its own. And in the South African context, you know, we're dealing with issues of huge inequality. And so while on the one hand, in a beautiful hotel, we're asking guests to save energy with us, or, you know, kind of highlighting the water crisis, in our staff's environment, they might not have access to energy or struggle with water. And so this very big disconnect needs special work. It's not something that you just go and start telling your teams about. What could we do? This is where we find ourselves in a crisis. And so we've taken a very focused approach with our teams first, because our teams and their families are our community. You know, we employ largely from our local community, so that's our direct impact. And making sure that actually we explore with our teams, what do they see, to your point, Caro, what do they see as the major crises facing us today? And try and pull out, you know, the social and ecological, because I think that when you can link the ecological to the social, there's a much stronger buy-in from everyone to working together on how to deal with this. And the word I would use as the thing we've learned the most around how to position that is, how do we create hope in that space and not fear? Mm-hmm. So we need to talk about it, but it's not something to scare people about. It's something to encourage, motivate, and provide hope. So I'm going to say definitely our own teams, and almost a little bit of a bottom-up approach to having lots of engaging conversations about why these are important issues for us.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Very interesting indeed, those communities around you, and starting, as you mentioned, by your own staff. Because we know that wine tourism is also to be considered as a marketing tool for our brands. Our visitors are our best ambassadors. And beyond selling wines, wine tourism is a great opportunity to promote our engagement and actions towards sustainability. Thus, as already mentioned by the three of you, wine tourism operations should be aligned with the company's culture and demonstrate its full commitment to sustainability. And the message must be consistent at all levels throughout the entire experience and be true to it. This obviously requires the staff to totally adhere to these principles. And the way you function, Heidi, was certainly gives some food for thought. Ask your staff what they think and implement their own thing. So how could they be more involved than when it comes from them? Adrian, how do you transmit your company's culture to your staff? Do you have programs for their education?
Yeah, we do that. I think, you know, I mean, summarizing what we have already heard, the idea, of course, is that all of us are part of the problem individually, collectively, you know, but we're also all part of the solution. So, you know, I think any contribution makes a difference. And I think if you can, you know, if we can tell our staff that whatever they're doing, whether it's in the workplace or what they do at home, what they do with their families, it all actually adds up. And there is a sense that with climate change that, you know, it's such a big problem, we need government to deal with it. And at the end of the day, 7 billion people can probably deal with it more effectively than the G7, even though the G7 has got a lot of money at its disposal. I think the other key point that I would say is that you know, for our core business, which is agriculture and is wine, you know, I try to underline the fact that the wine industry is different to many other industries, because we are, you know, we're probably the only branded agricultural business that I can think of in the world, you know, where people actually can go to a location, see the vines, see what's being made, and actually, you know, buy a bottle, taste it, and know exactly where it's come from. And that, I think, gives us a massive platform, not only to communicate with our staff, but also communicate with visitors. And that's why I think tourism has a very key role. You know, and I would make the point also that from the wine industry's perspective, you know, we have got a health lobby and taxes and all these other things that are against alcohol. And I think it's important that we can push back and say, well, hang on a moment, the wine industry can be a major force for good. And I think that's an important message. Again, the message that we send to our staff is the same that we send to our regulators or send to our politicians. And I can stand up as a CEO and make a few comments, but it's a lot more powerful if all the staff who work for us, they're also making that same comment to their local political leaders as well.
Yeah, it's obvious. I mean, the COVID-19 crisis has highlighted how much more can be achieved when different stakeholders work together, collaborate, and take action. It has also shown us how much is possible if we have the will to change. So the entire tourism community, including policymakers, private companies, public sector, tourism stakeholders, and tourists themselves, need to work together to promote responsible tourism and sustainable destinations across the world. Do you think, and I think you would agree, that wine tourism can be a means to develop collaborative relationships and build a strong enough community to have an impact towards decision makers or other kind of lobbies? How do you involve your local stakeholders? You talked about your staff, you talked about, how do you involve your local stakeholders and communities in the battle for climate action? Caro, for example.
I think that's a really good point about the lobbying making a difference. And I was just thinking, as you were talking there at the start, about how like one of the things we've done is make it as easy for people to be here, even though we're rural, to come to the local station. We pick them up, they come and stay, they can walk to the village, they can have dinner in the village. They're pretty much able to operate without a car. And I think that's an important factor, having this infrastructure. And the more we can develop that and kind of lobby for more like cycle paths and more, work with our local partners as well in terms of the restaurateurs and so on, to make sure that we have this little ecosystem of businesses that can work together in an environmentally friendly way. And I think people are looking for that, absolutely. Like I'd love us to have, there's a new green cycle path, just to give an example, that's been developed from like a 35-kilometer route from just the other side of Bergerac to the village that's 5 kilometers away, where the train station is, called Gardon. And I've been asking, like lobbying our local mayor to try to get us a connector up to Sossignac, because I think that would be so good for all of us. So I guess, if I get my act together, I can get the other players to work with me and we can all try and push for this. And that's the kind of initiative that's good for everybody, and that is certainly going to make a difference. If we can get people able to cycle to us and make this a really green friendly destination. I mean, Sossignac as a place is already kind of making a name for itself, in that we've got more than 50% of the vineyards in the appellation of Sossignac certified organic. And that's pretty massive. I think the average in France right now is 11%. So we're way ahead of the kind of general number there. And we've got a potential to develop this green tourism further. So yes, I think we have space to lobby and to make a difference to our communities too, because once there's a cycle path, that's great for all of the people that live here, not just the tourists. These are things that we need, even if we're rural.
I agree, of course. I mean, and the locals now are more and more important in terms of markets. I mean, as far as tourism and wine tourism is concerned, we've been noticing for the last month, unfortunately or fortunately, who knows. But yes, we need to address the locals more and more.
For sure.
I think that, well, for several years now, there has been an increased awareness of consumers on health and environmental issues related to food and agricultural production. This has led to a growing number of consumers to adopt consumption habits that are perceived as more sustainable. From your own experience, would you say that wine tourists are particularly sensitive to these environmental issues? Would they come to your winery because they are interested in hearing about your practices? Do you think there is a real demand of the markets in terms of wine tourism?
Can I go again? Sorry, jumping in again, but I would love to answer that just because, so for sure, we mostly have people that are already aware that we're organic, absolutely. That said, we'll often get groups where maybe some of them wouldn't be aware, and the amount of people that go away going, wow, my chin is on the ground. I cannot believe I had no idea about all of these issues. And so we are really clear in our sharing about, you know, what does organic farming mean? Why is it so important? And the climate change issue as well. And we're not scared to share about that. And people kind of go away with a whole new understanding of what's at stake and how, you know, if you use pollution, you know, if you use pesticides in your vineyard and they land up in the water source for the local community, that's not good. So it's kind of thinking, and it's exactly the same with global warming. We create more CO2 in the atmosphere. We're all implicated. It's a big effect. So I think, yeah, consumers are more aware, but I'm sometimes shocked at how not aware, in fact. So, but I think in the last couple of years, there's been a big ramp up. And I think in the younger people, absolutely, it's there because in schools, this is part of the curriculum. You know, you can't miss it.
Adrian, you wanted to react as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is critical when you know, raising awareness with people. They want to come. I think tourism is going to happen. So I think the idea that we've all seen, you know, the rivers and canals of Venice all clean and said this is wonderful tourism, no air pollution, so on and so forth. Tourism is going to happen. I think people are going to come back. So I think it's an opportunity that we need to take, and I think it goes back to that consistency point. I'm a little, you know, I think it's an opportunity when they come to us to broaden the conversation beyond purely carbon footprint. I think, to my mind, you know, climate action is and change is not all about carbon. If we just try to boil this problem down to carbon footprint only, I think we're going to not help people make informed choices. So, you know, although we make an organic port and we pioneered organic port, we don't have a lot of organic vineyards as a company. We do a lot more sustainable viticulture because we know that the carbon footprint on our organic port, just because of the number of passes we must make in a tractor, actually our carbon footprint is higher on our organic. However, the organic has, you know, has other benefits. So we need to talk, as Cara was talking there about, you know, pesticides is, yes, there's a carbon footprint to the production of pesticides, but the groundwater or runoffs that are coming from pesticides, herbicides have other environmental impacts. I think it's the fact that people come to us allows us to really broaden this story out and to educate them in a gentle way, you know, and I think it's making people aware. We're not there to lecture them. We're making them aware of what we're doing, and I think that approach is very collaborative and likely to produce better results.
Yeah,
Heidi, would you say, yeah,
I was going to say I support that 100%. You know, is that this is a learning space for all of us, and our guests and visitors included. So when they feel heard, as much as they're kind of being exposed to and experiencing things, it makes a huge difference. You know, one of the small things we've done is we have a little email address or WhatsApp that says you can do better at Spear, you know, so because people will notice things that they think we could do, you know, be better at. And we know there's probably a whole lot more that we could do, but you need other eyes to also look at things with you. And we definitely find, I mean, we have a lot of educational groups who come through. So we do a lot of educational tours, and then that brings other local visitors too, because then they bring their families back. And, you know, essentially you want your local community to be proud of the work that you're doing because they're doing it with you. You know, so they're not kind of, they're a part of this community that is more connected to our soil, to our land, and understanding the complexity of what we're dealing with. I mean, Cara spoke about this love for nature and putting people's feet back in the soil. You know, I think these are really important issues. And when our guests and visitors connect with the growing cycles and the challenges that are faced, it's a very beautiful and different connection that translates into how they might go back home with that product and how they might talk about their experience.
I think Heidi's point there is very important about the fact that the local community, and Cara was mentioning this as well, because it helps people feel empowered that they can actually make a difference. And I also think, you know, people come up with some great ideas. I was privileged enough to be down in South Africa actually over Christmas, and I was at a place called Babylon Storen, I think, in the wonderful. And I discovered there this wonderful thing they had in the middle of, in fact, in their fruit yard next to the vineyard, but they had an insect hotel, and I'd never seen an insect hotel, but basically somebody had constructed a kind of cover, and then in it there were bits of old wood, and there were cones, and there were old bit tiles, and there were just all these environments which clearly each little capsule or each little area encouraged a different set of insects. And I just thought how marvelous that was, and how easy in something as simple as that they could transmit their care of what's happening, and how important, you know, how important pollination is. We need the help from our little friends, and here they were putting an insect hotel there, simple to do, very inexpensive, but massively powerful in how they communicated what they thought.
Yeah, and easy to, as you say, to set, but so visual too. People understand right away what it's all about. We've got a few of those in wineries in Bordeaux, and it's always well received by the public. You said that I love the idea of suggesting your guest, you know, to come back with ideas through a WhatsApp or whatever tool. Do you have could you give us an example of what you got as an idea? Or Caro, you say you also asked your guest, you know, what should we do? Do you have any idea? Let us know. Can you give a few examples?
So we haven't actually had any direct suggestions from anyone so far. But yeah, often in visits, we'll talk about and exchange ideas. And I guess people often think of like saving water, collecting water, which is something we already do. That's certainly something people think of. Oh, one of the things that has come to us a few times is solar panels. And we have a project in plan to put solar panels on. So yeah, there's definitely been a few suggestions. Now that I talk about it, at first I was like, oh, but no, they have, absolutely.
Heidi, do you have any example you could share with us, or?
I think it's very similar to Cara. I mean, essentially what you would generally find is if people see something wrong, you know, or say, have you asked this question around the use of that reusable that packaging or that biodegradable packaging, or want to know more about something. And I think that that's fantastic, because you know, we've had this conversation around how important it is to be authentic, and that there's so many considerations to take into account when you're making decisions, that it's very difficult to just be absolute about something. You know, somebody can come back and say, what about this? And have you thought about that impact? And so it's valuable. You go, oh, that's fantastic. Okay, let's ask ourselves that question now when we're looking at packaging or we're looking at our water usage. So yeah, I'd say a lot more in conversation. And then when you're receiving information, it's generally either to ask for more information on something or to ask questions, so that, and they feel, you know, that they must feel safe to, you know, it's fine to be critical. It's fine to say, we're not sure, have you thought about this?
Yeah, sure.
Because we need that. We need to make sure that we're asking the right questions.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you know, tourism is a very different business to the wine business. I mean, the wine business is a kind of primary economic activity. Tourism is a tertiary. They have very different levers, but what they both have is a need for serious attention to detail. So this, this point is whether guests are giving you suggestions or visitors are giving you suggestions. They're certainly going to give you criticism if you're doing something inconsistent. So, if you want to be a great, wine hotel or whatever, and yet you're using extensive amount of plastics in all of your plastic straws in the bar and plastic here and there and everywhere, people are going to call you out. And what that requires, I think, goes back to this point of detail, but that's involving staff, because they need to think it through. So we give them the parameters and then say, well, what are you doing and what could you do? We can create that virtuous loop and hopefully not make a mistake. But I also agree with what Heidi's saying there. If we do make a mistake, I think we've got to accept the criticism and improve. And I think that's also an important point, is that we can continue to adapt and change and introduce new ideas the whole time.
Maybe if I could just share one example that, when we talk about actively working with our guests and therefore what are we learning from that collectively, I'm sure some of you are aware of the extreme drought that we've been through in South Africa, and there were limits to how much water could be used per day. And we had to look at how we would do that within a hotel context where people are coming to enjoy a hotel breakaway and run a big bath and, enjoy their wine and have some. And so one of the things we did was we just put together communication that said, these are the number of liters that we are asking you to please try and work with during the course of your daily stay with us. And then we listed activities and we said, this is how much is used. If you run a bath, this is how many liters. When you flush the toilet, this is how many liters. If you have a shower, so it's completely their decision to enjoy and relax and have a good holiday. And we're not wanting them to feel bad about the decisions they're making. We're just saying to them, please consciously join us. All South Africans are trying to stick to this daily limit. Here we go. Here's the information. Now, you can make your decision.
Wow, it's amazing. What a good practice, and quite easy also to do. We are always trying to measure everything, and so you just give the key. You just give the key to your visitors. This is excellent, really. And something else I was also very impressed with in South Africa, in the Cape Winelands, in the last months you've had several months of wine sales forbidden. Due to the pandemic, etc., etc. And I was so impressed that restaurants in the vineyards would continue to operate. People would go wine tourism without wine. I mean, that makes this. I was very impressed. They would go to the restaurants and enjoy wine tourism without wine. So this really means a lot, I think, from what you have achieved towards the locals.
Absolutely. And I do think that maybe one of the contributors to that is where restaurants many have looked after their local communities during the crisis.
Yeah.
So many chefs and kitchens were cooking food and making sure that we could do everything we could to support local food security all over our wine region. And so I do think in that respect, I've actually got goosebumps. In that respect, your customers are happy to support you, because you might not have that wine bottle on the table, but broadly they're contributing to a bigger cause. And then when you can serve that wine bottle on the table, they're there in an instant.
I think that's interesting point about that, because people did go and did wine tourism even without wine tastings. And I think that talks to two different points. I think for sustainable tourism business in wineries, we all need to be differentiated. So if all we can do is do a wine tasting, then clearly you're going to be disadvantaged when for whatever regulatory reasons you can't do it. And that, I think, should force us all to think a little bit more about what our offer is and how that fits in with what our neighbors are doing, and maybe collaborate with the neighbors. I'll do the cheese and wine tasting, and then you do the chocolate, and I'll encourage the people that visit us to go to you afterwards, and we'll know that we can both work together to bring more people into the area. I kind of seen something come through on the chat box from Lady Boards, which was asking what could be done more about institutions at a higher level, tourism bodies. And obviously, I know, Catherine, that you've been doing a huge amount on that. So I kind of want maybe to push an answer, but from a panelist back to the host to actually tell us a little bit more about how, you know, the tourism bodies and institutions are using this to help drive tourism.
Yeah, sure. Well, what I can talk mainly about Bordeaux, of course, but we've been working for several years now together with the Bordeaux Chamber of Commerce, the Bordeaux Wine Council, the Bordeaux Tourism Office, the City of Bordeaux, and now we also include the Cité du Vin in Bordeaux. You know, this amazing wine hub that has opened 4 years ago, talking about wine in its universality, not just about Bordeaux wines, but you have information about all the wine regions of the world. So people, all these institutions working together, of course, it brings, you know, we know each other, we collaborate, we promote things with the same ideas, same language, same concepts, etc. And that means a lot. I mean, we all can share both the knowledge, and the expertise and the promotion, each in our role, of course. We work as the Bordeaux Chamber of Commerce, we work for the development of companies, while the tourism board will be promoting the offer. But, you know, working together each in our field, it's very important. And now we do this on the global level, thanks to the Great Wine Capitals. I just mentioned this Best of Wine Tourism contest at the beginning of the session, but you have to be aware that this really produced a huge amount of exchanges of knowledge, exchanges of good practices, exchanges between the winners of the contest. We have in our cities, in different Great Wine Capitals, we have best of clubs, and the winners just integrate the club itself. And this is where we have meetings, we organize speeches, conferences, encounters, and they just speak to each other. I think in the wine world, one thing that is difficult is that, I usually say this, is that your neighbor is your worst competitor in the wine sector. But in the tourism field, your neighbor is your best friend. Mm-hmm. You need to be consistent here again with your neighbors, with your locals, and also with the other wineries. And it depends on where you are situated on the globe. But in Bordeaux, I must say that usually communication between the wineries is not as evident as it should be. So, you know, working together on tourism projects really leads those companies to improve the whole system. So I think this is very important. And we have this in our vineyards, but thanks to the Great Wine Capitals, we also have now Bordeaux wineries meeting with South African wineries, or Chilean experts talking to Spanish companies. And this is huge. This is networking, and this is why Great Wine Capitals is a success in that field. Good practices and exchanges is the basis.
Yeah, here in Portugal, we've got, wine tourism has become a strategically important part of tourism Portugal. And the reason for that is to help to develop tourism in the interior. You know, one of the great things about the wine industry is we're often in remote regions. You know, for some here in the Douro, for example, in the Douro region, you know, most of the economy is around wine and making wine and growing grapes. So not only does the promotion of tourism to the interior have a positive effect for the wine industry, but it also has the positive effect of diversifying the socio-economic activity, which makes the region more sustainable, because it is not simply dependent on wine production, it's also got tourism. And, you know, the Portuguese government has done a huge job to understand how that can work together. And what I found kind of interesting is that the broad-mindedness that we've had from Portugal tourism, which brings, and this is Catherine, and maybe your point you're making there, is the fact that they come at this with this idea of all collaboratively working together to promote a destination in a way that often wine companies, as you say, tend to compete more. So that's how Portugal's gone about it, and it's very positive.
Yeah, really.
It's interesting to just hear these stories, because it reminds me actually that when like 12 years ago, I was part of a small association of other organic estates that did wine tourism. And it was through that and visiting the other wineries that like my first setting up of all the information in our accommodation for like explaining to people what it all meant. Yes, we were already recycling and we had the green products and everything, but I hadn't actually thought to put it together as an information pack for people. So when they arrived, they understood all of this and why it was important. And, you know, giving their throwaway food to the chickens and all these things that by visiting one of the others in the group, I kind of saw they were doing it. So I started doing it. So I think that that idea of networking, well, we all know it already, but it is so powerful. And if we can get, you know, players that are thinking about this to bring their ideas from all the levels, because obviously, you know, the small winery like us may not be thinking quite the same things as say the big operation with 3 5-star hotels and, you know, who knows what else going on. And yeah, but all can bring something to the party, and so interesting.
Sure.
I mean, my recommendation in this kind of space, which is a lesson we've learned in the Stellenbosch region, is, you know, first identify how many different organizations are trying to do similar things. Or, I mean, we had a situation a number of years ago where kind of tourism was being dealt with separately from wine routes, you know, 2 different organizations. And so when you start to see the amalgamation of this, now we're really seeing the power of what this can be collectively. So it's almost just, you know, it's an initial landscape survey that says, well, actually, how many people are trying to promote the same things, but potentially with a slightly different, you know, angle, because that's how they were founded. And then see whether or not there's an opportunity to pool resources and maximize that opportunity collectively.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's very important and so much more powerful. Again, working together, you know, to tackle the challenges is obviously the good idea, really. And there was a question in the chat about how do we promote sustainable tourism? How do we make people know that they are those sustainable practices? Well, this is difficult. We have all communication tools, websites, blogs, social media, but if we, well, you are all in the wine business, so you all know about what we ironically call the labels jangle. We have Ash EV, carbon neutral, EU organics, among so many others. We also saw this safe travel label emerging during the pandemic. So do you think it would make sense in terms of promotion to create a sustainable wine tourism label? I mean, a global one, the one and only one. Would that make sense, or would it just add to the general confusion?
I think it could clearly make some sense, but there is, as you are clearly alluding, there is a potential for confusion. There's already a lot of authenticating bodies out there. The extent to which a badge is going to make all the difference, I don't know. I think consumers have become a little bit reserved about what they see in these badges, and they want to know whether people are actually doing what they say they're doing, and people are scared of greenwashing. So it goes back to that earlier point about making sure that you're consistent. I kind of get a feeling that we're at the, you know, we're well advanced in this discussion. It seems as though climate change and all these talks have been really only happening for 2-3 years. My experience is that the wine industry has been tackling this for 10 or 15 years. And if I talk to many companies, they've been doing something. They didn't really do it with the idea of, oh, well, I'm being a major climate change initiative, but they were already doing something. And that's what I found quite powerful with the Porto Protocol, is that we're bringing, you know, people together who've been doing things for decades, and that they hadn't really thought about it. And there's simple ideas, and they're able to implement it. But my sense is that in 5 years' time, you know, if you're not doing something, then you're going to have the reverse happen. The consumers are going to pull their support from you if you're not active. So it's not really a choice at the moment that should we do it, should we not? The answer is we're going to have to do it, and our consumers are going to make choices based on whether we do or don't. And we can't be telling everybody that we're super environmentally friendly, and yet putting out 1 kilo glass bottles, which just don't support that message. So, my sense of this is I'm not sure it needs another badge, because the debate is out there, and the more educated people become, the more they'll see through just a badge.
Yeah, I think you're totally right. I think there's so much danger in this proliferation of green symbols that are some of them not, that really are a bit of greenwashing. And of course, some companies using packaging where they have like green labels that almost look like they're something, but they're not something, that kind of thing. There's kind of almost fraud kind of things going on. But I think there's a lot of danger in too much. Like for me, when people ask me about the labels and all of that, in terms of environmental, like organic, biodynamic, all of that, for me, for us in Europe, the big thing is the EU leaf symbol. That's our guarantee that we've got a EU-wide regulatory thing that is properly enforced, and that if people lie about it, they go to jail. It's properly enforced, it's controlled, it's reviewed. The certifiers come twice a year, once that's announced, once that's not announced. You can't fake it. So that's a real reliable symbol. And I think once you start to throw in a whole lot of other symbols that dilute that, it's dangerous. And so I think in tourism, there are already kind of green labels. I'm not too sure exactly. Adrian, you're probably more aware of what they are in tourism than I am. But I think for hotels and so on, I think there are already initiatives like that, not in wine tourism, but in general tourism, that I guess wine tourism businesses could hook onto, that are kind of already there. But yeah, I think it's a good thing to have something that everyone can understand that is properly policed, like in the farming, the organic. But in tourism, for sure, some of these green logos, perhaps there's one that's really reliable and that wine tourism could be part of, and it could maybe have a some additional,
like a branch or like
exactly.
Well, the advantage you have as you're in the wine tourism sector is that you cannot, like greenwashing, you can't, because people will come and see.
Yeah.
We talked about that at the beginning, consistency in the message, in the welcoming your visitors, etc., in the staff implication, people will know right away that you've been greenwashing if you do this. That's one advantage you have regarding other sectors of the activity, right?
For sure.
And maybe if I can add on to that, I also think if we just put the tourism lens on, there's so much more to looking at what a responsible tourism environment could be. And so you would want to have a look at social and local community, and so you're adding on to that environmental focus. And I love Carol's feedback around when these are properly audited, they're great learning opportunities for the businesses. Every year you have to improve. That's real value for the business and for the consumer.
Yeah.
I think the problem comes when, and you see this in tourism, where many small operators have their own badges because they've got a list of criteria, and another operator has a different badge. And I think the opportunity in wine tourism is, we're going from soil to experience. And if there was an opportunity in that kind of covers, how we farm, what our viticulture practices are, how we make our wines, how we bottle and promote and sell, and then how you experience in our hotels. And it could be a great opportunity, because I don't know, we have a fair trade in tourism accreditation in the South African context, but I don't know that globally there's something really exciting that that could help consumers make good choices. And wine tourism, I'm not aware of other international logos and accreditations that exist, but I do think if we're really serious about this and we see it as an improvement opportunity, and it's not just about getting this label we put on our front door of the hotel or on our bottles, it might be an opportunity. So there's also this worry about too much, in the market. But then what is the wine tourism standard?
Yeah,
I think you have something that you go, that's what we would look to.
We are working, Great Wine Capitals, closely also with the World Tourism Organization, and this is probably something we could discuss with them, see how they would manage such a thing so that it really is global, or else, of course, we have our own French norms, we have the European norms that Caro mentioned, but if we want, again, some consistency and that it means something to the consumers, maybe we could have, I will have a talk with the World Tourism Organization.
Yeah, probably a simple way to do it is to, in a criterion TripAdvisor, when we get cleanliness, staff, price, so on, just if we ask TripAdvisor to stick, is this business environmentally friendly? You'd automatically get it. I mean, from a point of view of how you're rated and badged in the tourism industry, it's through social media, and that's what people read. So, we can stick whatever we want. We can make up our own awards.
Really
we can give ourselves an award.
Excellent.
But at the end of the day, it's the public and social media that's going to tell us the story and find us out if we're not consistent.
Really
I think this e-reputation is so important that you have to deal with on a daily basis, and this would be a good way to at least to understand what people think about this and about you in that field. Excellent.
Yeah.
Maybe to conclude our debate and still give some more food for thoughts to our audience, what would you suggest that would be the first measure a wine tourism business should implement to start kicking off this matter into a company strategy? How do you go from regular wine tourism activity to a sustainable wine tourism activity? What do you start with?
Well, I would argue that the first thing you got to do is start. So be bold, start, and it starts somewhere. I think, if you going to sit in a room and write a business plan and contemplate this for the next couple of years, you're probably missing the boat. So there's things you can do, and you can do it immediately. And I think one of the things come up in the conversation here is that there's great ideas, and Caro was talking about that in terms of what she saw in other organic farms. There's great ideas, we can implement them. So there's no excuse not to start. My other thought would be, be bold, but I also think long term, because, and it may be a function of my age, but I've somewhat decided that long term comes around rapidly. And then the key point is make it central. I mean, in my view, it's just make it central, and if you make it central and you're consistent, the only key point you have to remember is the customer actually cares. And if we're listening to our customer and they care, then we've got to get on and do something about it.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I think that you hit the nail on the head with this. Make it part of everything you do, and just don't be like a rabbit in the lights, because it's a scary thing, and we all can just be. But just start getting some actions in place, and I guess in our reflections on new products, it's thinking slow tourism, thinking walking, cycling, not more mechanized transport, not a whole lot more 4x4s. It's in everything we do. Absolutely.
Heidi, would you have a last comment or suggestion? How do we start with?
So I just wrote actually here, when we talk about measuring, so I'm going to take everything that's been said as kind of said as an intro. Don't forget that within our own organizations, that we follow the practices that we think and are enjoying with other organizations, which is this collaboration and sharing. Because often what happens is we start a lot of measurement and it becomes reports on pieces of paper. And nobody does anything with the information, somebody somewhere looks at the liters of water per liter of wine or whatever, and only if there's a red flag does everyone jump up and down. So the one thing that we've learned is, firstly, don't over measure. Really measure what you need to measure, because you can get stuck in over measuring.
Yeah.
And then collectively get people together to share what they're learning in our own businesses, so what have I learned in the cellar and how could it be applied in our hotel or vice versa? That's been a huge learning for us, is apply that internally and make the information alive. People come with it, they talk to it, why it's important. Never let it be a number on a piece of paper that somebody every now and then on a quarterly report says, our consumption was down 5%.
Well, thank you. Well, we actually reached the 60 minutes we were allowed to talk. We could continue this conversation, I think, for longer, but time has got it. And I will leave the floor back to Marta to end up the session. And first, just thank you so much, Heidi, Caro, and Adrienne, for your enthusiasm and for sharing this with the audience. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, all of you, for being here. Thank you, Catherine, for hosting this debate with us. I will start by wrapping up this conversation with something that you started by saying, Catherine, and that you ended up saying, Heidi, because it really comes back to what we are as an institution, Porto Protocol, which is how much more powerful it is if we act collectively and if we share, which is exactly what we are about in our institution, and if we share and what if we collaborate. So I think this is such an important message to start with and to wrap it up. But I would like to just share and reinforce some of the messages that were spread by you. First, best practice. And you said it, you've wrapped it up in these last messages of yours, but from reusing water in general, from reusing gray water, for example. I mean, Heidi, you gave an excellent example when you had your dreadful experience in Cape Town, by telling your guests what exactly were they spending, what the water consumption was in their activities. For example, the insect hotel that you're mentioning, involving your staff, your guests, your suppliers, and really giving life to, and you said it so beautifully now, just Heidi, never let it be just a number, really give life to the information you are sharing. And you share that, Carol, through the route you do, the trail you do, explaining what is climate change and what you're doing to mitigate and to adapt it. Consistency, do not walk your talk, really do what you're saying you do. It's so important. And as Adrienne said, social media, I mean, there's no way getting away with it. Social media will come back to you. And as you mentioned, TripAdvisor, for example, or any other platforms are a really easy way, actually, very easy way to put in, for example, a tag on environmentally friendly activities, for example. Look at wine tourism, just like you look at your wine production cycle. At the end of the day, it's a life cycle. Look at it in the long term, not just as a short-term activity. And start with your local authorities, and in a way lobby your guests. Everyone is part of your community. So I think this is very much the key messages you have here. I'm sure you have a lot to share as well. We'll be coming back soon with another climate talk, a completely different climate talk on July 2nd. Let me share it with you. It will be an initiative by Dr. Richard Smart, which if you're in the wine business, I'm sure you have heard about him. And it will be mitigating climate change across the wine industry, again, with guests from all over the world. So I'll wrap it up today. I will end up this webinar, and thank you so much for everyone on the other side of the screen tuning in from so many parts of the world. And I thank all of our guests for being here today. See you next time. Thank you. Bye-bye. Keep joining us.
Bye-bye, everyone.